You're not going to believe this, but the man in that faded photo behind my bookstore counter, he's the Pope now. Yes, that Pope, Leo XIV. But back in 1984 on the dusty hills of Peru, he was just Father Bob, and I couldn't stand him. I thought he was cold, controlling, everything I had come to hate about organized religion. I had almost given up on the mission, and even my faith. But what I saw one night behind a broken fence changed everything. And what he did for the son of a dying woman, it still haunts me in the best way possible. Before I start my story, please leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Seriously, I love seeing how far stories like this can travel. And if you like raw, honest stories about faith, hope, and real people, please hit the like button. It helps more than you know. Now let me tell you how I met the Pope before he was the Pope, and how a moment on the Peruvian soil changed my whole life. My name is Jack Brennan. I'm 63 years old now. I run an old bookstore in Denver, right near 14th Street. On weekends, I fix old bicycles, sometimes tutor kids in the neighborhood. Nothing flashy, never chased the big life, never wanted to. But that trip to Peru, it changed something in me that until now I still haven't really been able to explain. You know, in my early 20s I had a fire in my chest. Not anger, just a restless stirring. The world felt fake, greedy, loud. I grew up religious, Catholic more or less, but I was tired of dogma and tired of America. I guess you could call me a spiritual drifter. I still believed in Jesus. I just didn't think he lived in any of the buildings with his name on the front. So I signed up with a volunteer group doing mission work in Peru. Figured maybe I could help someone, maybe find a little truth while I was at it. And if you think that sounds noble, then no, don't give me too much credit. I was mostly running away. Running away from what? To this day, I'm not sure I knew back then, but I remember the feeling when I first landed in Chiclayo. The air smelled of dust and mangoes. The streets bustled with motorbikes and the shouts of vendors. And I remember the heat as if the sun were sitting right on your shoulders. We were driven to a mission house in Trujillo, and that's where I first saw him. Father Robert Prevost. I should have known from the moment I saw the clipboard. There he was, Father Robert Prevost, standing behind the bed of a white pickup truck, barking orders in fluent Spanish like a foreman in clerical robes. The man stood like a soldier, and his eyes scanned the horizon as if he were calculating something none of us could see. He didn't smile much, and when he did, the smile seemed efficient, as if it had been scheduled. I remember watching him assign tasks on our first day in Trujillo, snapping instructions to the local team, arranging supply crates as if he were about to lead a military operation instead of a mission of mercy. Every sentence was curt, measured, sharp. Water goes to Zone 3 today. Get it out before 10 o'clock. Clinic opens at 11. No delays. And I stood there, my poncho draped over my shoulder, hands still sticky with mango, thinking to myself, this is the man I'm supposed to follow? You see, I came to Peru chasing something spiritual. I was tired of America with its plastic smiles, its empty promises, its loud, shallow God. I thought maybe in the dust of a different country, I would find something closer to the Jesus I believed in. The barefoot Jesus, the one who worked with the poor, the one who didn't care about clipboards. But Father Bob, he was the complete opposite. Every day started with a rundown of metrics, vehicle rotation schedules, vaccine storage temperatures. He even corrected a nurse once for not labeling a first aid kit properly. A first aid kit, it wasn't that he wasn't kind. He wasn't unkind, but he was too clinical, too organized to a fault. It was as if he cared more about paperwork than people. And maybe that's what bothered me the most, because I wanted to believe he was a fraud. That this whole setup was just another institution dressing itself up in the guise of a mission. That I hadn't traveled 2,000 miles just to be micromanaged by a priest with a type A personality. I remember one particular morning, hotter than usual, the air thick as syrup. We were gathered near the van waiting to head to a village up north. Father Bob walked up, looked at his watch, then looked at me. He didn't say anything, just tapped the clipboard. No greeting, no "did you sleep well?" just tap, tap. That was the morning I almost said something stupid. I managed to hold it back, but later that day, while stacking supplies in the back of the van, I muttered to another volunteer named Theo, "Do you ever feel like we're not on a mission, we're in a Catholic warehouse, more like?" Theo just laughed and handed me a jug of water, but I wasn't really joking. I wanted to serve, I wanted to feel something real. I wanted to be something real. Instead, I was being timed on how long it took to unload crates. He talked more about rule books than the Beatitudes, more about logistics than love, more about structure than surrender. and that didn't sit right with me. There was one night I'll never forget it. We were sitting around after dinner, a few of us in the courtyard strumming a guitar, talking about God, about purpose, and all the things young idealists usually talk about when the stars are out and the air is soft. Father Bob walked by. He paused for a second, just long enough to hear the music, then kept walking. Didn't join in, didn't say a word. That's when I knew I didn't like him, didn't trust him, didn't think he understood. But this is where things get strange. Right around that time, when my frustration with him reached its peak, something happened. Something small, almost unnoticeable, but it began to chip away at the picture I had painted of him in my head. Just a flicker of doubt, like, what if I'm wrong about this guy? If I hadn't seen what happened 2 weeks later, I probably would have left. I was ready to go, but that night, that kid, it changed everything. We had been working for about a week and a half when it happened. It was supposed to be a good day. One of the local communities, a small village nestled at the edge of the hills, had finally gotten clean water thanks to the filters we helped install. Everyone was excited, grateful. Kids splashing around with plastic buckets as if it were Christmas morning. That afternoon, we were distributing food. Rice, beans, canned goods, nothing fancy but enough to feed a family for a week. People waited patiently in the sun, some barefoot, some holding babies wrapped in faded blankets. I remember an old woman kissed my hand when I handed her a sack of rice. I didn't know what to say. And then, commotion, voices sharp, urgent, Spanish that I couldn't quite understand. I turned, and there he was, Father Bob, grabbing the arm of a teenage boy, skinny, maybe 15 years old, maybe younger. The kid had slipped behind the tent and tried to walk off with an extra bag of food. I guess he thought no one would notice, but Bob did. He had the boy by the wrist, not hurting him, not violently, but firm, unyielding. And he was speaking to him in a low, steady voice, not yelling, but serious, cold. Esto no es justicia. Es egoismo, deshonra. This is justice. This is selfishness, dishonor. The boy looked like he wanted to sink into the earth. His eyes were glassy. He handed the bag back. Then Bob pointed sharply towards the end of the line. Not another word, just that gesture. And the kid walked away, head down, disappearing into the crowd. That moment it lit something inside me. And not the good kind. I felt my jaw tighten, my fists clench. I took a step forward, was about to say something, but Theo put a hand on my arm. I shook it off. What the hell was that? The kid was hungry. He wasn't a criminal. Who does Bob think he is? Some kind of holy customs officer. I walked away, couldn't even look at him. Went and sat behind one of the trucks, stared at the dirt, frustrated. And yes, I judged him harshly, with all my heart. I thought, this guy is not Christ-like at all, not even close. Because in my mind, Jesus would have given the kid 2 bags, hugged him, sat with him, not send him off like a thief in the market. That night, I told Theo quietly, but with real anger in my voice, I can't do this anymore, man. I didn't come all this way to enforce rules for some corporate Christianity. If this is what it's about, I'm out. He didn't argue, just nodded, said, maybe you should sleep on it, but I couldn't. I was too pissed, too disappointed. It felt like all my doubts about Bob were justified. Too clean, too cold, too obsessed with control. Not enough heart, not enough of Jesus. And so in my mind that was it. I was done. One more interaction like that and I would pack my bags, hitch a ride to Lima, and find my way home. But you're not going to believe what happened next. 3 nights later, I couldn't sleep. Got up, wandered outside the mission house. What I saw behind that broken fence changed everything. Not just how I saw Bob, but how I saw Jesus. It was 3 nights after the incident at the food line, and sleep just wouldn't come. The heat clung to everything, the walls, the sheets, even the ceiling. I tossed and turned for an hour trying not to wake Theo, but my body wouldn't settle. Something in me was still off balance. Not quite anger anymore, but not peace either. So I got up, grabbed my sandals, and stepped outside into the warm Peruvian night. The compound was quiet, still, the kind of stillness that only happens after a long day in a place that takes more from you than it gives back. I walked past the old garden fence towards the back of the property, hoping maybe the stars would calm me down or the silence would sort out the noise in my head. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the wind rustling through the tall grass. But then I caught the edge of a voice, low, steady, rhythmic, not a conversation, not muttering. It was prayer. I crept closer, careful not to step on a dry twig, and hid behind the corner of the old tool shed. There he was, Father Bob, kneeling barefoot on the dirt, hands clasped, head bowed so low it almost touched the ground. He didn't move. He wasn't looking around. He wasn't putting on a show for anyone. I could tell he thought he was alone. Across from him, about 20 feet away, was a small thatched roof hut I hadn't paid much attention to before. A candle flickered in the open window. Faint shadows moved on the wall, and it clicked. That was the boy's house. The boy from the food line. I stayed hidden, frozen in that moment, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Bob didn't knock. He didn't try to go in. He just stayed on his knees, whispering something in Spanish that I couldn't quite hear. Then he crossed himself slowly, as if each movement weighed a ton. Eventually, he stood up, brushed the dust off his pants, and walked away silently. I waited until I couldn't hear his footsteps anymore before I slipped back to my bunk. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say, but the next morning I couldn't help myself. I cornered Theo at breakfast, keeping my voice low. "That kid from the other day, the one Bob stopped. What's his deal?" Theo didn't even blink. He just looked at me for a second as if he knew exactly why I was asking. "His mom's real sick," he said. "Liver disease. The kind where if you don't get help, you die slow." I stared at him. "Bob paid for her medicine," Theo continued. "Didn't ask the mission, didn't ask the church, just reached into his own pocket and took care of it." I didn't know what to say. But Theo wasn't finished. "That neighborhood is crawling with gang spotters. They use kids like him to test boundaries. If he got away with stealing food in front of all those people, he'd be marked. They'd come for him next." He let that hang in the air for a second, as if he needed me to feel it. Bob wasn't trying to shame him. He was trying to protect him. I didn't answer. I just sat there with it, because suddenly everything I thought I knew about Father Bob, everything I had ranted about, rolled my eyes at, told myself in angry whispers, started to crumble. He wasn't a cold administrator. He wasn't some Vatican robot checking off boxes. He was a man who prayed in the dirt for a boy that everyone else would have written off. And he didn't need anyone to see it. He just did it because it was right. I had come here looking for Jesus in dusty sandals and open hands. Turns out he was kneeling in silence just past the fence, wearing wire-frame glasses and a sweat-stained clerical shirt. I didn't know how to start the conversation. After what I'd seen that night behind the fence and what Theo had told me, I spent the next few days moving through the compound like a man carrying something heavy in his chest. Every time I passed Father Bob, I felt this twist of guilt right behind my ribs. I had judged him, even condemned him, and I'd been wrong. But how do you say that to a man you've spent 2 weeks silently resenting? Eventually, I just stopped pretending. It was a Thursday morning. I waited until the breakfast rush died down, and found him alone in the rear courtyard, going over some inventory sheets with that same focused look he always wore. I stood there awkwardly for a second, hands in my pockets, shifting my weight like a middle schooler trying to ask a girl to prom. "Hey, Father," I said, clearing my throat. "You got a minute?" He looked up, not annoyed, just present. That's something I'd come to notice. He was always present, fully there, even if his hands were full. "Sure," he said. "What's on your mind?" I hesitated, then just let it out. "I misjudged you," I said, badly. He didn't respond right away. He just let the silence sit for a moment. "Is that so?" he finally said, his voice even. "Yeah," I replied. "I thought you were just another rule guy. Another system in a robe." I didn't get it. I didn't want to get it. Still nothing defensive in his eyes. No gloating. "No, I told you so." Just calm. "It's okay," he said. "A lot of people don't get it at first. I didn't either for a long time. That caught me off guard." I asked him what he meant, and that opened a flood I didn't expect. He told me about his first few years in Peru, about how idealism wore off fast, how the poverty here could break you if you didn't learn how to carry it without letting it eat you alive. He told me about the burnout, the nights he questioned everything, the guilt he felt whenever he had to say no to someone in need because there just wasn't enough time or money or hands. He said something I'll never forget. "Love without discipline collapses into chaos, and discipline without love becomes cruelty. Christ held both fire and order." That line stuck to my ribs like wet cement. After that, I started joining him more. Not because he asked me to, but because I wanted to. I wanted to understand how a man could carry so much weight and still move through the world without bitterness. We worked together in the afternoons, planning small outreach projects to the outer neighborhoods. I started teaching English to the kids, music too, just simple stuff on the guitar. The local boys liked to clap offbeat and laugh when I messed up Spanish lyrics. It became a rhythm of its own, beautiful in its simplicity. And Bob, he wasn't hovering like I expected. He gave me space, encouragement, but also correction when it mattered. If I was late to a meeting or forgot to prep the materials, he'd let me know. Not with anger, but with this look that said, "You can do better, and I know you want to." And for once, I didn't mind being corrected, because I knew where it was coming from now. He wasn't managing a mission. He was protecting something sacred, the dignity of the people we served, the integrity of the work. And in his eyes, if you were going to invoke the name of Christ, you had better carry it like it meant something. And so I tried to show up, tried to listen more than talk, tried to love the people the way he did, quietly, intentionally, without needing credit. And slowly, my heart stopped fighting. That season in Peru didn't last forever. 3.5 months, give or take, but it felt like a lifetime compressed into a heartbeat. When it was time to leave, I didn't want to. I'd stopped seeing it as a trip. It had become something else entirely, an initiation, maybe a kind of burning away. I came to Peru thinking I was going to help people. I left Peru realizing I had no idea what help even meant, because what I got there wasn't just a lesson in poverty or discipline or missionary work. I got to watch a man quietly bleed for people without ever asking for applause. I saw what it looked like to carry Christ into chaos, not with noise but with backbone, with grace that had weight. And in the middle of all that, I met her, Lucia. She worked in one of the medical clinics. Sharp mind, soft voice, and the kind of laughter that cuts through exhaustion like sunlight through rain. I offered to tune her guitar one afternoon, and we just never really stopped talking after that. We moved back to the States a year later, got married in a tiny parish in New Mexico. I kept teaching. She worked in public health. Eventually, we settled in Denver, opened a bookstore, not because books were lucrative, but because they gave us a place to stay rooted, a place to plant quiet seeds. The mission never really left us, it just changed shape. Sometimes I wonder if any of those kids from Trujillo remember the songs I taught them, or the beat-up gringo with the broken Spanish who tried to play Bob Marley on a nylon string guitar. Probably not, but maybe one of them does. And then one morning, decades later, I'm sitting in this exact chair behind this exact counter, and I see the headline, "Robert Prevost elected Pope Leo XIV. I stared at the screen, coffee halfway to my mouth, like time had stopped. Lucia called from the kitchen, asking what was wrong. I couldn't even answer her. Not at first, because in that moment I didn't see a pope. I saw a man kneeling barefoot in the dirt behind a broken fence. I saw him correcting me, not with words, but with his life. And I thought, the church just got a good one. I still keep that old photo taped behind the register. Me and him under the Peruvian sun. I don't show it off, but every now and then someone asks about it. And when they do, I tell this story, not to brag, not to impress, but to remind them and myself what's possible when you stop running, when you shut up long enough to listen, and when you let God crack you open in unexpected places. So maybe you're listening to this, wondering why any of it matters. Maybe you feel like the church is cold, or like the world's too far gone. Maybe you've already packed your metaphorical bag and told God, I'm done. I get it. But before you give up on faith or people or yourself, let me just say this. There are still men like him out there, and God still shows up behind broken fences in the middle of the night. I didn't go to Peru looking for a pope. I went looking for something real, and I found a man with calloused hands and a heart full of fire, quietly building the kingdom of God one soul at a time. If that's not proof he's still working, I don't know what is. So hey, if this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of someone you once knew or someone you still hope to become, do me a favor. Hit the like button. Not for me, but so more folks hear stories that still have heart in them. Subscribe if you want more real moments like this. Quiet stories, deep faith, no filters. And in the comments, tell me something. Who's someone you misjudged, and what changed your mind? Or maybe just drop a prayer for someone you've been thinking about. And if this meant something to you, share it. Send it to a friend who might need a little reminder that God still works through ordinary people, and sometimes those people become popes. See you in the next one.